I'll hand over to the chair. Thanks. Yep, thanks. Hand over to Councillor Durham. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, the 5th of November. Okay, if we would like to move on to agenda item number 1, which is introductions and attendance at the meeting. Could I just pass over to Shirley to advise of any apologies, and if you would like to do a roll call, Shirley, please.
Yeah, okay, will do. So I think don't think we've got Councillor Barch on the call at the moment. Okay, maybe wait for him to join. Councillor Boddy isn't on the call at the moment. Councillor Cruddas.
I believe Councillor Cruddas is in the meeting. I think he joined late.
I think he is here, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah, Councillor. Hi, Councillor Cruddas. Obviously, Councillor Durham, you're here. Councillor Harker.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
I've got apologies from Councillor Linda Hughes. Mrs. Doris Jones.
Yes, I'm here, Shirley.
Councillor McEwen, I believe, might be joining us later.
Yes.
Apologies from Councillor Paley. Councillor Renton.
Here.
Councillor Tate.
Yes, I'm here, Shirley.
Okay, thank you. And I think have we got Councillor Johnson on the call yet?
No, Councillor Johnson.
Here yet. Councillor Marshall, Cabinet Member for Economy.
I'm here.
Councillor Keir, Cabinet Member for Local Services.
I'm here, Shirley.
Thank you. And then in terms of officers, we've got Elizabeth Davison, Assistant Director Resources.
Yeah.
Dave Winstanley, Assistant Director Transport and Capital Projects.
Yes, here.
Anthony Sandys, Head of Housing and Revenues.
I'm here.
Brian Robson, Head of Capital Projects.
Yes, yeah.
Christopher Mains, Towns Fund Programme Manager. Not got Christopher on yet. No. Andrew Perkin, Andrew Perkin, Business Growth and Investment Manager.
Yeah, I'm here.
Sarah Travis, Business Growth and Investment Officer.
I'm here.
And Claire Gardner-Queen, Housing Manager.
Yes, I'm here. Morning, Shirley.
Morning. And I think that's everybody, unless I've missed anybody, Chair. I think that's everybody who's actually in the meeting.
You missed me out, Shirley.
Sorry, who was that?
Mark.
Oh, Mark. Morning, Mark. Sorry.
Morning.
Councillor Barch just got here.
Brilliant. Morning, Councillor Barch.
Thank you, Shirley. Really appreciate that. If we can move on to agenda item number 2, which are declarations of interest. Does anybody want to express an interest on any item on this agenda? Okay, none noted. If we can move on to the minutes of this set meeting on the 10th of September. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Would anybody like to make any comments? Okay, I propose to move the minutes. Do we have a seconder? Does anybody like to second the minutes?
I'll second, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Renton. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 4, which is a review of Businessweek 2020. And I believe this is Sarah Travis.
Andrew Perkin was going to lead on this one.
Andrew Perkins, apology. Okay.
Yeah, hi. Businessweek 2020. Normally, Businessweek's been running now for a number of years in Darlington, 3-4 years, and it's a celebration of obviously businesses in the town and a chance to give a wide range of support and networking opportunities for the business community. Obviously, this year is very different in terms of where businesses are in the town. It's more looking at, it was more seen as an opportunity to actually support businesses with recovery actions, with building resilience into their opportunity, into their business, and looking at ways in terms of widening their customer base, their markets, and diversifying the business as a chance to hopefully bring about some long-term sustainability for each individual business. So we kind of targeted from a very early point. Businessweek would be very much focused on sort of the response to COVID-19, etc. And we took a very early decision to put the entire programme online. Historically, it's been a series of sort of interactive workshops, networking opportunities, etc. This year was entirely held online using a variety of sort of platforms to engage with businesses and to support them. So we had a series of, I suppose, 17 events over the course of the week to try and promote different aspects of business. And those were put on by colleagues from the council and a wide range of both public and private sector partners and stakeholders. So we kind of covered a whole range of topic areas around marketing and promotion, around HR and workforce development, around about looking at international exporting opportunities, etc. So there's a variety of different things that we put on, really trying to appeal to different kinds of partners. And there was also a number of networking events, virtual networking events, such as the North East Chamber of Commerce, Tees Valley Business Club and Darlington Business Club. So there's quite a variety of different activities there for people to engage in. Obviously, it was the first time we've done it online, so it was a little bit of an unknown in terms of how successful it would be in terms of absolute numbers, in terms of attendance. But we did end up with like 250 businesses registered for the series of events. Some were more popular than others, as you'd expect. There were issues with dropouts on the day, but we'll learn from that, and we'll hopefully put in place measures to minimise that in the future. But for those participants that did attend, the feedback's been really positive in terms of developing new skills, developing new approaches and new ideas to sort of hopefully supporting individual businesses through this difficult time. As part of Businessweek, we also hosted a virtual jobs fair, which was an online jobs fair activity to really promote the wide range of job vacancies that are currently available. So we did this via a Facebook Live event. And again, we ended up in the course of the actual jobs fair, we posted something in the region of like 100 live vacancies to the audience that were attending. So again, proving that there's a variety of different job opportunities available right now. So again, feedback's been quite positive since the event, and we've already now put in place a date for next year's activities, which will be the sort of 4th of October 2021, when hopefully we can go back to a combination of both obviously virtual event activities, but also some real workshops, live face-to-face activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll open it to the floor. Does anybody have any questions? I've got Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if there's any way of, or if you knew how many of those 100 job vacancies had been taken up by people who attended the fair or during the fair, if that was.
We don't know the actual individual details right now. It's always a difficult challenge trying to obviously follow those activities up, but certainly some of the larger organisations we engage with on the day, we can chase that up to find out whether those vacancies actually were completed. Obviously, it's still relatively early days in terms of sort of 3 weeks since that activity. Yeah. So over the course of the next sort of 3 weeks to 6 weeks, we should know more data around that.
Okay, so you will be chasing that data.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renton. Does anybody else on the floor have any questions? Okay, Andrew, just a couple of questions from myself. Going back to the overall attendees for the event, how does that compare to previous years? Outside of the norm, shall we say?
It's actually probably down on previous years. I think normally we get between sort of 400, 450 attendees for the whole programme. So it is slightly down on that. Again, we obviously put that down to it being a virtual event. And obviously people have been focused on different activities just at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just obviously one observation is there was a skills workshop which was cancelled, so it obviously points to businesses concentrating on the here and now.
Very much so. It was disappointing the skills event had to be cancelled because, again, there wasn't the interest from the business community at this moment in time in taking on new recruits and new skills. On the positive side, those people that had registered for it got one-to-one support from Darlington College, so their needs were addressed, probably in a very bespoke manner as opposed to a general workshop activity. But I think one of the things we need to learn from that is actually, as we move forward and hopefully move out of the pandemic, we'll maybe look at doing some kind of bespoke skills events as one-offs, not part of a Business Week activity, because skills development clearly is an area where in terms of moving forward, businesses will need to evolve their skills, whether that be digital skills, sales skills, etc. So it's something we are looking at to actually doing as more as one-off events as opposed to part of a big programme in next October.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got another couple of questions, but I'll bring in Councillor Harker and then Councillor Renton.
Thank you. Is Chris McEwan's now in the meeting? Because I think he's going to ask a question which I was going to pick up.
I think he's in. I think I've just admitted him in, so I think he's there, Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Chris is probably in a better place to ask the question that I was going to ask. So if he's now in the meeting, I know he dropped out.
Hi. Sorry, Chair, for my lateness. It was just on Business Week and lessons learned, and in a sense, it's been answered in that there is some adaptability. But it was just to get in more detail. What lessons have we learned from operating in this new environment of virtual business support? And whilst Business Week is a set piece, can we take any of the learning from what happened during Business Week to set up a programme of support and events throughout the year, particularly given the pressure that business generally will be under? Thank you, Chair.
I think in response, there was quite a bit of learning from this new virtual approach. And again, I think we need to learn from that and adapt for future activities. And as we said there, like the skills example, we need to do more kind of, I suppose, bespoke activities throughout the course of the year as opposed to as one-off events. And we're complementing Business Week with a series of development workshops, so that it's not, again, just focused on 1 week of activity. So we have got in place a series of resilience and regeneration workshops to help businesses think about how they can plan for the future. One of the issues we did have was, for example, substantial dropout rates, where we had, say, 20 people registered for an event. Dropouts were probably much higher than we would normally experience if it was one-to-one, face-to-face kind of activities. And again, it's how do we then sort of put more, I suppose, pre-event resources into ensuring, people will attend. You're always going to get dropouts, we expect that, but it was particularly high on this occasion. So that's something we need to learn. And again, timing, I think, the events tended to happen during the day, particularly events targeted, for example, the retail sector, where they could have been probably put on at different times or more suitable times to their activities. So yeah, there has been learning. There's certainly things we will change for next year's event, and there's certainly opportunities for doing a programme of business support, business resilience workshops over the course of the coming year.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reassured by that. I mean, one thought would be, I know other sectors have sort of tackled with this sort of online support and learning. And one thing that's been trialled in other sectors is to do recordings, but time limit them, because often if you know it's been recorded, you might keep putting it off. But if it expires after a certain time period, then that might induce people to actually take it up.
Yes, certainly. Some of the events this year were recorded and are actually available online for people to sort of to view at in their own convenience. But again, it's a good point that actually, if we could put more of the content recorded and make it online, it then brings more opportunities for people to engage with the programme.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKeown. Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. My question has pretty much been answered by Chris, but I think I was going to ask if we could quantify the cost saving for holding this virtually.
In some ways, the actual cost savings are quite minimal because through the generosity of partners in previous years, it's cost the local authority only really the promotional costs involved.
Yeah.
Venues, speakers have all been provided free of charge historically. So in some ways, the actual cost savings are quite minimal. So although it's a good strong argument to say, well, yeah, more of it should be done online, it's that cost benefit analysis in terms of, well, actually, what are the challenges, the issues that we have to overcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renton. Just going back to, I said I just had a couple more questions. Just leading into what Councillor McKeown was talking about there in lessons learned, and you alluded to, Andrew, is the fact that there have been obviously some lessons learned, and the Businessweek may change in the future. Would you be able to come back to us at some point as and when that crystallises that thought process?
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay. And just a final question from me. Just going to paragraph 9 in the report, it mentions that there were details of over 100 live vacancies. Are we seeing those vacancies being on a like for where potentially roles have been lost during this this pandemic, or are we seeing roles coming up which are offering a low wage, shall we say, in previous years?
I suppose that's difficult to answer in terms of sort of the variety of vacancies that were promoted on the day. I suppose was a mixture. It's difficult to answer because it was like half and half. There were some which were like replacing the old kind of traditional jobs that we've seen in the town. But then there was an area where there was certainly a surge in new areas of activity, and it been very blunt. It was like the delivery kind of activities, whether that be logistics, such as DHL, Amazon in terms of their facility. So there was quite a large number of those kind of roles. But then there was also quite a number of like administration type activities. So a bit of a balance of both, if I'm honest.
Okay, so we're not seeing a flood of what you may call seasonal or temporary sort of opportunities within the current market.
No, there weren't many actual sort of short-term seasonal posts that were pushed during the actual jobs fair.
Thank you, Andrew. And just have Councillor Renton wants to ask another question, and unless anybody else, I'll look to wrap that up.
So it was just a follow-up from that. Was that intentional that you didn't advertise that sort of jobs, or was that just who applied?
No, it was more because of the availability of information around those jobs. The only temporary jobs that were promoted on the day were from the post office, but no other organisations came forward with actual sort of short-term temporary job opportunities for us to promote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renton, and thank you, Andrew, for presenting that report. And I don't doubt there's a lot of work that goes into this event, and it's obviously been extremely difficult, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Towns Fund forward funding. This is a presentation by officers, and is this something that you're going to be picking up, Mark?
No, it's I'll take it forward. It's Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've got a presentation which I'll share with the share on screen and just run through the presentation if that's okay.
Thank you.
Is that on screen yet? Yeah, okay. So this is specifically about the Towns Fund forward funding. Councillor Renton?
Councillor Renton, I think your hand's up from the last question.
Apologies.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so forward funding, we submitted an application to government on the 31st of July 2020, following an offer of £1 million funding, which was provided. That £1 million funding was received at the end of September. So the aims of the fund, these are pulled out of the letter that was received from government. 3 key points. It was looking at improving new parks and green spaces and sustainable transport, improving specifically the town centre, in particular looking at repurposing commercial properties, and also looking at demolition of site remediation. It's important to say that they wanted things with immediate impact. So the projects that were selected were to have immediate impact within the spaces, the town centre in particular. So what was put forward was 4 interventions within the £1 million. One was the yards phase 1. Now it's phase 1 because it's part of a wider look at the yards in totality. So phase 1 includes Clark's and Buckton's yards with the intention to transform and improve the public spaces. And item 2, which should be, is town centre lighting enhancements across the town centre. And number 3, town centre Wi-Fi. And number 4, acquisition of Northgate property at the bottom end of Northgate. The target completion date, 31st of March 2021. That is when we need to have spent the £1 million. So looking at the yards at first, the phase 1, Clark's and Buckton's yards. This is a bit of a high level overview here of what we're looking to achieve. I mean, the yards themselves they're already there. They're already an asset. It's developing that asset, capitalising on it, getting the businesses enthused, making it a pleasant place to be. But we're looking to simplicity, classic design, building on the heritage that's already there, putting illumination in there, improving the illumination, basically to encourage dwell time, create a culture within the yards themselves, not cafe culture, a vibrant culture to bring people in so that they spend time there, to surprise them when they go into the yards, so that you walk in the yards and people that haven't been there before, it's a surprise to what you find in there. So it's a good news story. We return to former glory, and any negative perceptions that exist, we want to dispel those. I'm sure you're all aware where they are, but this is Skinnergate down here on the left, High Row on the right, Post House Wynd, and this is Buckton's Yard with an entrance of High Row and Skinnergate, and likewise Clark's Yard. So where we are with the yards at the moment, we're busy designing the landscape, the public realm, the ground, if you like. We've got a landscape architect employed on that, and we're at the stage where we've got some drawings. You'll see them later on the slides, and we're looking at those at the minute with a view to get those into planning and listed building conservation consent as well. We're also looking at each building, so we're creating a schedule in basically every building, every wall within both of the yards, and looking at proposed proposals for each and every building up within that yard. Some might have nothing, other ones might be a full shopfront change potentially, and it's a lot of tidying up, a lot of things like wires, loose wires, broken pipes, things like that. There's a lot of that sort of work as well in there. So we've commenced engagement on that, and we're starting to engage with ideally every business, every owner within there. Now some of the owners are, a little bit difficult to get hold of in cases, other ones not. But we're in that process at the minute. So it's got next steps and target timeline. We're looking to agree them concepts and direction, continue with our engagement, and that's something which will flow right throughout the process. It won't stop when we start on the ground. It'll continue. And what's likely to happen is that there'll be variations to the contract. It'll be add-ons. There'll be stuff that gets put into phase 2 that we'll kind of deal with within the time frame that we're looking at. So we're looking to get planning consent January, and ideally unlisted building, and ideally start on site January to March. And it won't stop in March, I'm sure of that. It'll continue, but that is specifically this pot of money. It's a little bit small, but that's an engagement flyer. That was front and back of the flyer, which has went out to the businesses down both of the yards. It basically gives them a flavour and builds the excitement. I think there's quite a bit of excitement developing in the yards over this. And these are not specifically what it's going to look like down the yards, but it's concept images to give a bit of a flavour that things that we might want to do. It's a mood board in effect. So some of the things we're looking at, I mentioned the general clean and tidy. We're looking at new planters and specifically having a common theme and ethos flowing through each of the yards. Might be different in both of the yards. We're working on frontages, signage, so bringing back the conservation standard signage, wood signs, looking at lighting throughout the yards. That may be, specific lighting for each business, but also entrance ways, I think, are important. We're looking at a green wall in particular in Buckton's to see if we can get that off the ground. That'll bring some greenery into the yards. External cafe seating. Now that may be more of a generic seating area like you get in some places, rather than specific to that cafe. It might be somewhere where if there's 2 or 3 reefs within the yard, they might be able to come and have a common seating area. Entrances are very important in terms of signage and lighting, bringing people into the yards from Skinnergate and High Row, and important they're tying in with the last presentation we've just had there, linking with the business community to create these spaces where we can put stuff in there, but the businesses themselves have got to form communities and take it forward and make this sustainable going forward, which is happening. So this is a concept drawn for Clark's Yard. It gives you.
Apologies, I'm not seeing the slides as they move on. I don't know whether it's just me or whether others. I think I'm still seeing the second or third slide.
Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear that.
Apologies. I'm only seeing what I think must be the third slide. I don't know whether it's just me or.
Yeah, it must be Councillor Harker. At the moment, saying 9 of 20.
Right, I'm still seeing 6 of 20. Right, okay. Apologies.
Do you want me to just step back a little bit?
No, press on if it's just me.
Okay.
Chair, I'll send the slides via email if.
Thanks, Shirley.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll sort of slow it down a little bit. I realise I'm rattling through some of the slides a little bit here, so the Clark's Yard's concepts. It's giving you. You're obviously going to, it mightn't be this type of lighting, but we're looking at lighting down the top and specifically in. We're looking at the cafe type areas, planters, and basically there's a bit of green wall potentially, and lots of text. We'll get these sent out as Shirley mentioned there, so you can actually look at this in a little bit more detail. This isn't the final plan. The plans have been sent to our conservation officer, who's looking at them at the moment. I've commented on them, and then we'll be taking those forward and going back to the landscape architect with our suggestions in developing fairly quickly, because of the timescales, to get something that we can get into planning and bring through. It's my thinking on this is we're looking towards a core project. If there's going to be things that are in here that take more time, some of the shop frontages, getting agreement with the owners, developing some things. So what is likely to happen is we'll get a core project, and as we're developing, things will get added into this and added onto it, and it'll all be within the common theme. It's whereas each individual business will be taken and spoken to individually, it'll need to flow within the common theme that we're developing for each of the yards. And likewise, this is Buckton's yard. It's similar. You've got a green wall there. We've got this similar approach here. There's various different planters. We're having discussions at the minute about what the planters might look like, and they're going to be quite influential in whether it's going to look a little bit industrial, and perhaps we don't want that, or whether it's going to be perhaps a little bit too Mediterranean, which has been said. And I think it needs to be, there's a bit of debate on these things. It's going to be important to what the flavour of each of the yards is. So moving on to lighting enhancements. Now that's specifically within the town centre. So it's looking at creating an impact. It's making sure that it's deliverable within the timeframes, and keeping an eye on the costs that each one, because these can be quite expensive items. Phase 1 we're looking at, which we're progressing at the minute, is the clock tower. There's an image on a future slide which shows you the sort of thing we're thinking about. The Pease statue, at the moment we're looking at bringing the light, and that's there on the ground, improving that and casting the light up under the statue. It may be that we're shining a light on the statue if that's not appropriate or adequate. The benches and the planters in high row, that will be low level. It'll be along the bottom of the planters, along the bottom of the benches, and it'll give a feeling of light flowing through high row, not particularly intrusive. And the central library, that will tie in with the refurbishment works that's going on there. So that's improvements specifically to the external of the central library. So we're looking at delivery for these by 2021. Approximate cost of those is round about in total 150. Phase 2, we've made good progress on each of these three. The reason it's phase 2 is obviously these are not in the ownership or the remit of the council. It's the Quaker Meeting House and the church. Whereas the War Memorial is, there was a little bit of a tricky technical issue we need to look at on that, which we're looking at the moment. We've been in liaison with the meeting house and with the diocese and St Cuthbert's Church, and we've got proposals for each of these to improve the lighting. And we've got signed meetings set up with St Cuthbert's Church and just about it with Quaker Meeting House. And the really positive about wanting to work with on these, and I think St Cuthbert's Church in particular, well, both of them, St Cuthbert's Church with improved lighting down the bottom will give a real backdrop to the Market Square, and the Quaker Meeting House will be really a first stage of starting to pick important buildings out along Skinnergate and in the rebirth of Skinnergate in that particular area where Quaker Meeting House sits. So again, we're trying to deliver March 2021 on these particular. We may not deliver by that date. It may be that by that date we've acquired the equipment and we're going into delivery, but the total cost of these ones is in the order of £50,000. Other buildings that we're looking at now, we haven't taken at this moment. We haven't taken these forward. We've got draft schemes. We're looking along Grange Road in various other prominent buildings within High Row and into Duke Street and perhaps around the Market Square at some point in the future. But we'll have these proposals because of the complexity of getting and deliverability of these in the short term. we haven't pushed on these. We're trying to deliver phase 1 and phase 2 initially, but we haven't forgotten about these or anything else that may come up. This is looking at the clock tower, so it's a mixture of low and high level lighting, picking out the key features around the top and particularly around the bottom. And we're looking, of course, at looking at the possibility of changing the light colours like you've seen around the country during lockdown and the early days of lockdown. That's not just to say just blue, there may be other colours as well. But I think it'll be quite impressive once we get this going. Not particularly good slides on this one, but that gives a, you know, the lighting will be around the bottom, casting up onto the peace statue. If that isn't sufficient, we may need to bring something down onto the statue. And again, lower level along the planters and the benches, a long high row as you go there. Moving on to town centre lighting, this isn't a definitive map. We're actually trying to increase the areas with coverage. The blue on this is just council-owned property, and the green is the areas we're looking at for where the Wi-Fi would extend. Now you can see the yards there. I'm quite keen on making sure we get Wi-Fi within the yards and around external to the market square, to the market hall. So this is progressing at the moment. We've got our ICT team looking to go through a procurement exercise to both procure the ongoing support for the Wi-Fi and also the installation as well. So again, similar timescale to what was along for the lighting, where we're looking, it'll probably be end of January through February, March, when there'll be the installation. It'll capitalise on fixtures, on light fittings and things like that. I'm not an expert on Wi-Fi, but colleagues in ICT are taking that forward in a minute. And Northgate property is, I've kept this slide deliberately vague. We are in the process of developing offers for at least a couple of buildings at the bottom of Northgate. One is a very prominent building, obviously the Northgate House, but it's quite sensitive at the moment, and also something associated with other buildings towards the bottom of Northgate. Now, as with buying any property, there is always a risk with expenditure on this. It may go to the point where we need additional funding to bring this in, actually be able to buy it, or we don't get it bought by March. But at the minute we're progressing, and I'm reasonably confident we'll get somewhere. And that's the presentation. So if I can take that off, hopefully.
Yep, that's gone.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Just before we open the floor to questions, Councillor Harker, did you receive the slides? And have you been able to follow through?
I did, yes. Shirley sent them through, and that was very helpful. So okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, if we would just move, open up the floor to questions, if you don't mind answering those, Chris. I've got Councillor Cruddas, first of all.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, is just a small thought. The developments in the yards, you know, putting planters and things in there. In the past, the council has not been very good at providing ongoing care of these things. You know, we have loads of fountains and gardens and things around the town that have suffered over the years because of lack of maintenance. So I just wondered how we, you know, that we do. I'm just saying, let's not forget that whatever we put in the yards, you know, presumably street scene have got to pick up the care of that, and that's an ongoing thing. And I realise that the council approves that year on year, but we should try and make these things as sort of sustainable as they can, with without as much attention as some gardens may need. That's all.
Yes, no. Good point, and it is something obviously that we have thought about a little, but it's not something that we're totally pinned down. One thought I've had is linked to building the business community in there. It's almost going back to the let's build up enough pride in there almost that the businesses themselves want to clean their own doorstep, so to speak. I'm not suggesting that will be able to be applied in all cases, but it's certainly something. If you get a pride in the place, then the community around there will look after it. But yeah, it's a good point.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. If we bring in Councillor Doris Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Brilliant presentation. I'm very impressed, Chris. I really am. It's always been very close to my heart to improve those lanes. I've lived in Darlington all my life and I've loved them, except evening times, they're quite eerie and I wouldn't dare go down them on an evening. Bearing that in mind, I was pleased to see the improved lighting down there and the greenery, and I do support what Councillor Cruz said about maintaining the greenery. Would it not be possible at the same time as doing all this, we could just fit some CCTV, because Skinnergate is known as the drinking area on a night time at the moment, and I'm sure with all of this improvements we could build that out, but I do think that some CCTV in the lanes would prevent any antisocial behaviour going on down there and make the traders feel a lot more secure and a lot more pride in their business as well if they know it's being watched 24/7.
Thank you for the compliment on the presentation. It's just touching on that. I'm not from Darlington, and I knew Darlington a little before I started working for Darlington. But the yards were a surprise, and still are a surprise to me when I mean, I've done, unfortunately, a lot of my work has been remote, so it's been via Google Maps. But when we get out of this, I will spend a lot more time down there. But in terms of CCTV, yeah, that's a very good point. And whereas we have talked about security, we haven't specifically got onto the CCTV issue. So I think that's something which maybe I'll bring up with the businesses and see how they're feeling on there. And certainly if I had a business down there, I suppose I would feel it would be appropriate. In terms of I didn't touch very much on what phase 2 of the yards is and the intervention coming in from the Towns Fund, but phase 2 is looking and continuing on the Post House Wind and looking into Mechanics Yard and pushing out into Skinnergate itself and looking really again at the public realm and looking at how Skinnergate operates, which I realise is quite a sensitive issue, and then trying to pull in the I suppose the softer purple flag type nighttime economy down into Skinnergate and bring people in. We're pulling potentially residential in as well down in one of the schemes on Skinnergate. So if you can get, it's looking at building that whole community around there. But I take your point on CCTV. It's good.
Jeff, I just may add, I also meant to add in the importance of the Wi-Fi there, because those traders are unable to advertise their businesses online with Facebook or any kind of web page simply because there isn't the Wi-Fi to allow them to do it. So thanks again for adding that in. Great asset.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If I bring in Councillor Chris McEwen, because I appreciate that he's accessing remotely at the moment. I think he's on his phone.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate that. Can I thank Chris for his presentation? And certainly from a personal perspective, it is good to see that there is still a strategic and visionary approach for the town centre, particularly in these challenging times. I've got 2 points or questions. One is on Wi-Fi, and I accept what Councillor Doris Jones is saying. But I do think we need to be ever mindful of the change in technology, particularly around mobile telephony and data packages. So we've got to basically ride 2 horses, I would suspect, of keeping an eye on this, but also be mindful of the fact that technology is changing and be careful not to invest when it might not be needed. But I don't underestimate the challenge on that, because I think, as Councillor Doris Jones pointed out, increasingly traders do need that Wi-Fi technology for contactless payment and other such things. The second point was really on Skinnergate and the fire damaged building, recognising that this is probably an operational and tactical issue, and you're outlining a more visionary strategic plan of how we're going to develop the town centre generally. I do think there is a here and now issue that could go on for a year, a couple of years, that we need to tackle, because as it stands, it does put a bit of a blight on Skinnergate. I don't know what the solution is, but actually, if it goes from 1 to 2 years, it moves from being like an operational issue that's potentially impacting on the sort of the tactical and strategic work that we're doing if we continue the blight. And I don't underestimate the challenge, but I just thought it's important to flag that, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question, Chair.
Would you like me? I mean, I take your point on the technology, and it's something which, again, we have discussed. And I think the advice from ICT colleagues is, yes, when 5G coverage comes into the town and we get it in there, it improves. It may be that this Wi-Fi that we're getting in now, maybe it will be defunct in time, I'm sure, but whether that is 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But I think there's an acceptance that it will be, I think it's needed now, and it will be an impact, but there will be sometimes when the technology becomes defunct. I appreciate that. In terms of the fire damage building, I'm aware of the building, and I'm aware that it is quite a subject along Skinnergate. I don't know the detail on that. I know Mark in particular has been involved on the scheme over there. But you're right in that if we don't get it resolved, perhaps within a period of time, then once we're wanting to move out and impact on Skinnergate itself, obviously we need to address that particular building. I was just approached by one of the properties on Skinnergate yesterday via the chair of the Towns Board, actually, and so the message is already getting out there, really, which is really good. And I think the issue on Skinnergate is almost going to be just holding the floodgates back that little bit longer till we can move on through and get the business case and the project developed a little bit. So it's encouraging to see, but yes, that building needs address.
Thank you, Chris. I've now got Councillor Renton, and then Harker, and then Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we had an idea of what the ongoing costs for the lighting and the Wi-Fi would be, and also would we be using eco-friendly light bulbs?
The light bulbs themselves, I'm sure, will be LEDs. I would hope so. Again, we're working with generally with a very reputable company, so I would expect them to be. In terms of the Wi-Fi and ongoing costs, we're trying to build in a 5-year contract, which is captured within the capital costs and part of the deal, so that way you've at least got a 5-year cover on the Wi-Fi cover going forward, which is, you know, worthwhile, certainly within, now we've got the money there. In terms of the maintenance on the lighting, yeah, there will be an increased maintenance cost. I think at some point we'll need to take a decision as to how often the lighting is on, and how often this enhanced lighting is used, whether we start to use it for specific special events or whether it's on all the time. I think decisions to be taken then based on cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renton. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. One of the questions has largely been answered, I think, which was about the revenue implications. And I think Councillor Curtis and Renton have mentioned two aspects. One's to do with the planting, one to do with the Wi-Fi. And you answered that, I think. The second question I had was, in terms of the yards, you know, I appreciate the ownership of the buildings will be a mixture. Some we will own, some will be owned by the businesses themselves, some will be owned by landlords. In terms of what we're trying to do, does that really need the engagement of those communities? Or, you know, if there's someone stubborn that isn't interested and thinks it's all rubbish, can we still crack on and do it and effectively work around them? Or are we reliant on? Because I think what point I'd make on finally is that there's some very good stuff in there. And as you said, as an incomer to Darlington, I myself was many years ago, they are some of Darlington's best kept secrets, and perhaps we do keep them secret too much. There's a huge amount of potential in there, but it does require that engagement of the business in there, and I'm sure most will, but there's always a but.
Yes. Everything's not going to be rosy, and everybody's not going to say yes to that. I mean, the approach being taken at the minute is very much one. There's a real opportunity here. We've got the money. We'd like to change your door or your window, and I think we're not quite getting people. The message starting to get through there, and people are coming back and saying, "Yes, give me a new door, please." And there's that approach. But yeah, there will be people that will say, "You're not touching my building." I'll do that. But the approach being taken at the minute is one where we will work around them. I mean, the core project I mentioned was stuff that is definitely within our remit, or stuff that we can do on the ground. And I think one of the things we're looking at, and we're trying to get out there before even the main contract gets out there and starting to make an impact. So I've asked, and we're looking to jet wash the 2 yards and clean the 2 yards up in advance during this lockdown period when it's going to be quiet. So we're looking at that at the moment. We're also starting to engage on there's new businesses moving in as we speak. I mean, there's the Baker Man's just moved in there. Little Quaker Gin is just in the process of moving into the yard. So it feels like it's a good point, and these people are really behind it. And obviously it's a new business, they're really enthused. So it's everything from that down to the people that we won't be able to get hold of, and they just won't respond, if they're absentee landlords and they just don't engage, then to some degree we will have to work around them. Yeah, appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. One of my questions has already been asked by Councillor Doris Jones, but I'd just like to mirror her thoughts on security. I think if we're going to go to the investment levels that we are on the yards, I think cameras would be a great idea, especially at both ends of the street, so one at Skinnergate end and one at High Road end. And my second question, I don't know if it's a technical question, just in regards to the Wi-Fi that we're looking to install across the town. What's the sort of speeds that will be delivered by that Wi-Fi service, and what's the capacity?
Picking up on the last one, I'm not an IT expert or Wi-Fi expert by any stretch of the imagination. I can do what we're doing now, and that's me. But my expectation is that the Wi-Fi will be able to be used potentially for businesses to advertise. We might get a home page on there. That's the sort of thing I'm looking at. In terms of capacity, I don't know, but I can find out. And on the second point on security, I think it's enough now to say I need to go back to the team and say, can we look at the CCTV that could be provided along there and see if we need to build that in there and take that forward and have a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. I've just got Dave Winstanley who wants to come in there, I think.
Yes, Chair. It was just to add to the points that were raised by Councillor McEwen in terms of the scaffolding around the building. As part of the project, we are looking at options to screen the building with a more aesthetically pleasing view. So it was just to raise that point as well. Like I say, we're looking at options now to improve that. So hopefully that'll be covered.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Just a couple of questions from me, Chris. I think it was in one of the very early slides. Now, I've lived in Dartmouth all my life, and I think the yards, to be honest, now for me are more aesthetically pleasing than what they have been in the past, because we've got more businesses in there, etc., and a different type of business to what they maybe have been, shall I say, late 80s, early 90s, so to speak. You made comment about the former glory of the yards. I'm just wondering which period are we talking about there?
we have got Chris Lloyd from the Northern Echo, and we've also got somebody in the Towns Board who's very engaged in local communities. So we're starting to delve into some of the past histories of the yard. And by former glory, there isn't one specific period I'm looking at. I suppose it's looking into the history and seeing, taken from when they were first built and pulling it through. I know Buckton's Yard, for instance, was named after John Buckton, who was quite a prominent person in the town. We've got a little bit of history about him, and I'm trying to find a little bit about Clark's Yard and just build up the story, I suppose, from the bottom, and almost taking it not in one of these, when you go into one of these type of museums and they take you through the edges, but basically just try and pick some key points in its history to where we are now. And I suppose if you try to, I would probably regret saying this, but the thought that keeps me going in the ideas behind the yards in that sort of area. If you do a sort of a combination of the feel, if you like, of Borough Market, the York Shambles, and sort of parts of Amsterdam, the better parts of Amsterdam, that's a sort of gel together on a small and compact scale, and that has kept me focused on the yards, if that helps at all.
No, that's great, because it just leads on to something I was thinking about, is that we've obviously got 2025 coming up, and one of the things that I was hoping that we would see as part of 2025, and it's probably through private enterprise, but I don't know whether it's something that would link into the council, is that maybe we have walking tours and we are bringing in the history of the town, etc.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. I think anything that capitalises on the 2025, I mean, generally the whole Towns Fund bid and everything within there is hung on to the back of the 2025. So when we develop the programme further, we'll bring that in. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. And I think we've just got Councillor Chris McKeown who wants to come back in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to pick up on a point that Chris was making and make a comment. Question, you mentioned somebody on the Towns Board who was quite interested in the sort of history. Who is that?
It's a community representative, Yvonne Richardson.
Oh, right, okay. So,
yes.
And that brings me to a sort of a wider issue, and I know it's a challenge with all of these kind of things. How do we get more widespread views into it? And the test I always say is, if I were to go into Horton Club, which I'm occasionally allowed to do, not during lockdown, I might add, and say, have you heard of the Towns Fund Board? Mally, who's 75, will look at me as though I'm talking French. So it's how do we really get that? Because I'm sure there is an appetite and knowledge and love of the yards, and it's how we use extensive sort of northern engagement to really capture some of the history and all of that. And finally, before you answer, I will make contact because I'm the ceremonial mayor, so I've got chains for hire, which if you wish to use in your mission, please feel free to use for the good of the town centre at any time.
No, that last point there, Chris, is that definitely, I think we need to use everything that we've got to really to bring it forward, and that will certainly come forward at time.
Chair, can I just apologise? I didn't mean it chains for hire like it might have been misread. I'm willing to go and support with my chains the mission to make our town centre better. Take the spade off me, somebody.
I was just going to say, Chris, chuck the shovel away.
Sounds like I understood, Chris, so it's fine. Yeah, it's in terms of the engagement, both short term with the yards and in the wider Towns Fund, it's not an easy one to tackle at this point in time. I mean, I'm quite open to talk to anybody. It's one of the things I like to think I'm reasonable And it's quite frustrating at times not to be able to go down and sort of knock on doors and go into the cafes and start. But that's not possible at the moment. So the yards, in particular, the phase one, because of the time frames and because of the need, if you like, to make impacts and get it on, we've quite tightly focused engagement just on within the yards themselves. I'm happy for that flyer that we've done to go anywhere, and I perhaps need to push that out a bit further. It's still relevant. It was only done a couple of weeks ago, and perhaps that can be pushed. I'll go to Love Darlington and at least get that out there via the social media streams a bit more. Into the engagement, I'm very quickly realising we need to get. We've got a stakeholder engagement plan that we'll put forward with the submission to Towns Fund. That was quite high level. We need to now drill back on that and get some support and basically look at resource and that, not just for the yards, but for the whole of the Towns Fund. It's starting to fall on officers who that isn't their particular skill in some cases, and fall on me, and I'm happy to address emails, but very quickly across the town. Once we do get it out there, more than what we've got, the flood coming back will overwhelm if I don't get something, the structure set up to deal with that. So it's a very key point. I'll take that.
Just got Mark Ladymoo wants to come in.
Thanks, Chair. It's just really, obviously, what Chris has gone through today is the £1 million forward funding that we have. But just to remind members that we were successful in the overall bid as well for the Towns Fund, which has been, really well received by members and also communities. So we've got our work cut out to come up with various types of business plans now to access that money, and I'm sure in the future we'll be more than happy, Chair, to bring back updates on these business plans to Scrutiny to ensure that we get buy-in from members as well. Councillor McEwen picked up something really important there on engagement. Engagement is one of the foundations of the Towns Fund that we really need to ensure that we not only just communicate and consult, but we engage with people at a very early stage. And as Chris has pointed out, that is at a high level has been agreed by the Towns Board. But we really need to drill down and ensure that we engage even in these rather challenging times as effectively and as widely as possible. And I'm sure members will play an important role in that because of their contact at local levels. And it's often those hard to reach groups that we must ensure that we get their views and they feel part of it. So because the Towns Fund is about not doing it to people, it's about people being part of the actual exercise and the programme of events. And just finally, Chair, just on the Skinnergate issue, and Dave kindly has said some of the talked about some of the short-term initiatives we've got. The fire damage building is a listed building, so we've been working very closely with Historic England, but clearly during the initial lockdown period, the ability to have site visits was pretty much curtailed. We have now got back on track with them, and hopefully by the end of November time we'll have a pre-app that we can bring to the planning committee in as a full planning application. Hopefully before the end of the calendar year, if not very early in January, where I've talked to members before about the residential development that we plan to actually deliver on that particular part. But again, I won't give members assurances that this is going to be easy, because it's right in the middle of a thoroughfare. So there's going to be quite a few challenges in delivering that project, Chair. So hopefully that update helps.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it, and thank you to Christopher. It's absolutely fantastic presentation, and we've got a short window here to March 2021, so there's no pressure to deliver that, obviously. for the first phase. Just going back to Mark Ladyman's comments in terms of engagement, I think all members know here, and obviously Mark talked about it there, that the key stakeholders in all of this are the residents of Darlington, and we do need to engage as far-reaching as what we possibly can. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 6, which is the process for the write-off of a recoverable debt, and I believe this is Anthony Sandys who will present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we were asked to produce this report to go into a bit more detail about how debts are written off, and also to produce some flow charts as well, which are included in the back of the report. I've also got my colleague Claire Gardner-Queen, who manages the rent collection side of things, so she can answer questions on that particular aspect. I don't intend to go through the report verbatim. It's quite long, and there is a little bit of repetition, because obviously whilst there are separate process for each type of debts, there are obviously a lot of similarities. So I'll just pick out the key parts if I can. On the first page, I think the first thing to really highlight is that we collect an awful lot of money in terms of council tax, business rates, rent, and overpayments of housing benefit. And last year that was £119.2 million. So obviously part of any process where you're collecting that sum of money is that some debts will be irrecoverable and we have to write them off. And while some of the amounts can seem large, of course, we have to put them in context against the amount that we actually collect. To move on to the main body of the report, in terms of council tax business rates, along with all of the debts, there is a statutory process that we follow in terms of national legislation which governs how we collect debts. And for council tax and business rates, there's a process from the issue of the bill through reminder notices through to the summons to court and obtaining a liability order from the magistrates court. And once we have that liability order, it gives us the powers to do further recovery action. Generally, we'll always seek to try to make an arrangement with the debtor. If not, and they're working, we can apply for an attachment of earnings from the employer to recover it through their wages. If they're on state benefits, we can apply to the DWP to make deductions from those benefits, although there is obviously a financial limit, which currently is £3.70 a week, so it doesn't give us a lot of scope to recover via that means. However, if we can't recover through any of those methods, then we will refer to our contracted enforcement agents, otherwise known as bailiffs, of course. And we normally write to the debtor and say that it's going to be passed to the bailiff, which gives them the last chance effectively to engage with the council and to pay their debt to us. Once it goes to the enforcement agent, we generally don't interfere with it unless there's an issue of vulnerability. So if you do have residents who have the bailiffs on the doorstep and they need some advice, we would generally signpost them to places like the CAB or to talk to the enforcement agents themselves. We generally won't get involved in any recovery action that's gone to that stage. If it comes back from the enforcement agent as uncollected, there will be limited options as to what we can do with it, and those are set out in paragraph 13. There are some things like orders for sale and bankruptcy, but as you can see, there are some financial limits to that. So it's only where the debt exceeds £4,000 that we can look at an order for sale and £5,000 for bankruptcy. So if the debt's under that level, again, the options are limited. Generally, the debts will come back as either no trace or no goods. No trace is kind of self-explanatory. We will try and take further action to trace the debtor, but otherwise we would recommend for write-off. No goods is where the enforcement agent has made a judgment that there are insufficient goods that can be removed to cover the value of the debt. And I would point out that there are very, very limited cases where they will remove goods, despite what you'll see on the television where you get bailiffs going in taking sort of expensive items. That's generally not the case with our debts, particularly for council tax. There's usually not much that can be removed that would be worth actually going to auction for. And for business rates, a lot of the items in businesses are leased, so they can't be removed. Once it comes back, it gets referred to one of our specialist recovery officers. Generally, they'll only look at debts over £500. Ones below that will get recommended for write-off. And once it gets to that stage, I haven't actually got a flow chart for that, because they look at everything on a case-by-case basis, and they're looking at what's happened so far, what's the likelihood of success of taking further recovery action, what's the debtor's history and whether they've had previous debts written off, and of course any legal advice that we take. They will also of course try to contact the debtor again, but if they can't get any contact or the person won't engage with us, then again they have to look at what further action practically can be taken, and if of course they decide not to and recommend for write-off, that's where you'll see debts being written off as not financially viable to proceed. Paragraph 19 sets out some of the other options. A lot of these are what we call mandatory write-offs, so things like bankruptcy, where someone has died and there's no assets in the estate, and the statute bar ones, the ones over 6 years. Generally, we have to write those off. There's not many options to do anything else. There is a further one about hardship, and those are the ones where we're already collecting money from people's DWP benefits, and we've got other debts, or the debt is increasing. We'll look at whether it's actually reasonable to take further recovery action against the debtor. To move on to former tenant rent arrears, again, there's a set of national legislation which sets out when we can start proceedings against a tenant who has not been paying their rent and fall into arrears. At the moment, of course, there's no recovery action being taken because we can't take anything to court, but we are still obviously engaging with tenants about rent arrears. Point to make is that we don't write off any rent arrears whilst tenancy is current, so it's only when it becomes a former tenant rent arrears that we consider write-off. But once a tenant has obviously left and is no longer a council tenant, again there are limited options, and of course we're right at the end of the process. We've already taken a lot of action up to this point to try and collect the debt. And of course, if we couldn't collect the debt whilst they're a tenant, it becomes even more difficult once they're a former tenant. Generally, again, debts below 500 will be recommended for write-off. Debts over 500 will look at options such as attachment of earnings or referral to an enforcement agent. And again, there are the same types of write-off in paragraph 26, similar to council tax and business rates as to the reasons why we can write off. The one thing we do have as a lever, of course, is if someone reapplies for housing for us and has rent arrears, because generally we will always insist that they either clear their rent arrears or at least are repaying them and have a payment arrangement in place before we consider them, and that's set out in paragraph 28. And then finally, housing benefit overpayments. Again, we administer the housing benefit scheme on behalf of the DWP, and we have to follow their rules and their legislation. We do get overpayments of benefit, generally caused by a failure of the tenant or the landlord to report a change of circumstances which either reduces or stops entitlement to benefit. There are other overpayments that can be caused by official errors made by ourselves or by the DWP. The best way of recovering overpayments are to make weekly deductions from their ongoing housing benefit payments. However, this is becoming increasingly difficult as cases are being migrated over to universal credit. And whilst we can make deductions or apply for deductions from universal credit, that's not as effective a method of recovery, as overpayments are quite low down on the list of priority debts. So I suspect as we go along, and the overall amount of housing benefit overpayments are reducing because there's less cases, of course. I suspect we might have to write off more debt as we go along, as it becomes increasingly difficult to recover that debt. Again, the reasons for write-off are set out in paragraph 36, similar to the other types of debt. The other one, just one point to make, is in relation to official error overpayments. We don't generally recover those, but because the DWP subsidises the council in full for those types of debt, providing they're kept below a certain financial threshold, then there's no financial implication of writing those debts off. So there's a bit of a brief tour through that long report, but I'm open for any questions, and Claire can answer questions about rent arrears if you have any.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the report. I'll open the floor for questions. Do we have any questions on this report? I've got Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions which I can sort of batch up in two related lots, if that would help.
Yep, thank you.
The first is, thank you for the report, Anthony. I know it's a very complex area, and I know that officers spend an awful lot of time chasing debt. In paragraph 8, where you give the figures about in-year collection rate, I mean, I know the figures because I've seen these figures for a long time, but I'm shocked every time I see it, that the in-year collection rate is only 52%. And I know one of the questions is, what is the actual percentage it's once we've been through that debt recovery? Because I know it's much nearer to 100%. But I'm always astonished that essentially council is being given a task to go through various enforcement processes to get the tax in that, you know, essentially lots of people aren't making their lives and our lives easy by simply paying what's due when it's due. And the second question I'd ask, and you've hinted at it a bit in terms of changing to universal credit, and you said, I think, that in terms of debt, ours is a fairly way long down the list in terms of priorities. Can you say a bit more about who's making those decisions? Is it government as opposed to the local authority? And what's trumping us in terms of more important debts? And the wider question, is government aware that that's having an impact on our, or will have an impact on our collection rates? In a sense, they're going to end up losing out, because if it becomes a big problem, the revenue that the local authority has will diminish to some extent, and you know, we can't replenish that. So the issue will end up sitting with government, and it does need to try and redress that if it ends up being an ongoing and increasing problem that we face.
Okay, I'll deal with the first question. The in-year collection rate mentioned in paragraph 8 was up to the end of September. So generally, we will look to collect in year around about 96% of the council tax and around about 98% of the business rates. Obviously, collection carries on after the end of the year, and the target, or you know, where we look to roughly get to, is about 99%. So you are right, it's nearly 100%. So obviously the amount, the 1% that we don't collect, is the amount that generally gets written off. Obviously we have teams of people in place, and whilst they're processing things like direct debits and payments that are coming in, the majority of the time is to collect that 3 or 4% that isn't being collected. So all of our effort is on the very small percentage of people who don't pay. And of course, you know, again, it should be made clear that an awful lot of people do pay. An awful lot of people come to us and ask for help and advice. There are the cohort who don't pay generally fall into the can't pays and the won't pays. The can't pays are the people who struggle and are on benefits, and again we try to help those where possibly we can. The won't pays are the ones that usually end up with the enforcement agent. They're the people who just won't talk to us, so we send them to the enforcement agent, and of course the fees and costs go up at that stage. In terms of your second question about deductions, that list of what's the priority debts, and there's a very long list, are set by the DWP. Fortunately, things like council tax and rent are quite high up the list. And Claire will confirm also that we're increasingly getting bigger and bigger sums of money from the DWP to collect our rent. Our rent arrears, as I've pointed out in the paragraph 8, are actually lower than this time last year. So whilst other social landlords have seen their rent arrears go up and up, actually, although more cases are moving over to universal credit, we've seen our arrears stabilise and starting to come down. And we are seeing bigger sums of money coming from the DWP, so that is a positive. Same with council tax. It's just that the housing benefit overpayments are, I say, way down the list, because you've got things like electricity and gas arrears and things like that, which of course understandably are higher priority debts for people than an overpayment. But I do suspect we've been left with a little bit of a poison chalice by the DWP, in that whilst cases are transferring over to the DWP with universal credit, the debt stays with us. We do get subsidised for that debt, so we do get 40% anyway, and we are quite successful in terms of recovery. I think last year we collected £900,000 of overpayments, but nevertheless it is becoming increasingly difficult. I can't remember if that was all the questions you wanted to ask.
In that round, yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harker. Elizabeth Davison, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It was just one bit of clarification, Anthony. With regard to paragraph 8, when Councillor Harker was talking about we'd already collected about 53% or 52% at this point in time, is that mostly in council tax because we're on a payment period through a whole year? So it's not necessarily that we haven't collected the debt, it's just the debt isn't due at that point in time?
That's right. I mean, most people pay by instalments like we all do. And of course, a lot of people paid by direct debit. So, of course, we've already kind of banked on the money coming in. So we're fairly confident that we're going to hit that 96% target, because most of the money has been already set up on arrangements or direct debits.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify it wasn't because people weren't paying. Most of it's because it isn't due to be paid until later in the year anyway. Thank
Absolutely
you.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Does anybody else want any questions? It's Councillor Harker. I'll bring you back in, and I've got some questions. Councillor Harker, I think you're just on mute.
Indeed, I am. Thank you, Anthony, for the questions, for the first few questions. The second question is more about the process, and I think you said in your presentation that much of what's done is described in statute. Is my understanding correct that essentially what you've laid out in this report in terms of the process you go through is effectively what you are instructed, permitted to do by government, and there's a process that you follow through, and really the skill in the officers is more about how diligently they follow that process in terms of both collecting the debt, but also in the way that you touched on, that there are genuine cases of hardship, and it's getting that balance right between working out which people are, having a laugh and which people genuinely have actually got serious financial problems, and actually getting that balance right. And my question really is if that is the framework that you're working in, and that's what officers have to deal with, in your view as an officer, is there much more that your staff are able to do to make this process better, either for those who are genuinely struggling, or for those people that are, just taking the mick and trying not to pay what is owed? Because I fully appreciate it's a hugely difficult task, and there are genuine cases of hardship that do need to be dealt with very sensitively, and weeding those people out, I suspect at times can be very difficult, sorting out genuine hardship cases and those that are not.
Yeah, I mean, the legislation gives us lots of options. Of course, what we do is down to our own recovery strategy and what we feel works best. As I said, we will always try and make an arrangement with the debtor, and it's important that we give the debtor plenty of opportunity to contact us. To get a liability order, you've already gone through a process of reminder notice, notice of legal proceedings, a summons. They've been to court or not physically physically, but the debtor's been to court, we give them another opportunity to pay by arrangement. And we always explore I suppose, the easier options for us, which is the attachment of earnings or the deductions for benefits. When it gets to the enforcement agent, it's usually because they just won't engage with us, or they've made an arrangement and broken it, and again, it's not going anywhere. There are a lot of debts, I guess, that do get sent to the enforcement agent, and there are a lot of debts that get returned from the enforcement agent. So when we get to sort of that stage, our options are running out a little bit, because the debtor has been approached not just by us but by the bailiffs as well, in terms of trying to make an arrangement. And so when it gets to our recovery officers, who are the last chance, they are looking at what else we can do, and of course they are focusing on the biggest debts, because again the debts are prioritised in terms of the value, and again, whilst we recover a lot of money, it should be brought in mind that the scale of the numbers of debts are quite large for what is a relatively small team. So at any one time, we'll have roughly around about £5 million of debt at liability order stage, and roughly about 10,000 debts. So the volumes are large, and managing those, obviously we have lots on arrangements, lots on attachment of earnings and deductions that get monitored, but we just physically couldn't contact every debtor at that stage and phone them every week and say, and try and contact them. So there is a bit of prioritisation, and that's why the debts over 500 are generally looked at. The ones under 500, if it's been through the process and we've exhausted all the options, they get written off. And as I said, we focus on the big debts. So if we do have debtors who've got property, we're going to go after them in terms of forcing a sale of property, and we've done that quite successfully in a number of cases to get particularly empty properties sold to pay off our debt and all of our fees. So that's what generally they will focus on, which is why when you look at a debt of £500, you think, well, what more could we do? With the resource we've got, probably very little.
Thank you, Anthony. Councillor Harker, did you want to come back in?
Can I just follow up on that last point? And clearly, you can only do what you can do in terms of the resources you've got. If there were more staff, is it getting to the point now, even with more staff, because the sums of money that concerns that the cost of employing those staff isn't going to outweigh the value of the debts recovered, i.e., are you at the point where the balance between the numbers of staff and the debt that's been written off is probably in equilibrium, or could a shed load more staff be thrown at you and you could actually recoup money that was actually economically sensible to do so?
I think I have to be careful about saying if we had shed loads more of staff, we collect lots more money, because there is that balance about getting the right amount of staff to effectively recover the debt. And of course, if I was making a business case to get more staff in, I'd have to be confident that they could recover not just their salaries but more, of course. And I think at the moment we have the balance right, that the overall debt has been coming down, and yes, there's always things we could do more or quicker, because the quicker you can look at a debt and contact the debtor, the better chance you've got of collecting it. But I certainly don't want to give the wrong impression that we're under-resourced, or that we could collect lots more if we had lots more staff. I think that's obviously a discussion I could potentially have with Elizabeth, but I don't feel we're particularly out of kilter. And of course, we have had many years where we've been asked to reduce our staffing because of the financial constraints of the council. So it's getting that balance right. I think we've got generally the balance is pretty much right, as I feel it is at the moment anyway. But yeah, although debts are written off as not financially able to proceed, that doesn't mean to say we could have collected it had we had lots more staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Anthony, just a couple of questions. obviously, the first thing is on paragraph 8. It's pointing to business rate collection is slightly higher than the previous year, and obviously everything that's been going on since March. Is that because there's potentially been some companies who maybe haven't been affected significantly during COVID have had a cash injection because of the blanket grant scheme that's been applied?
Yeah, I think in terms of business rates, obviously we've given out over £16 million of retail relief to a lot of businesses who for this year haven't had to pay business rates. Now, a lot of those would have been some of our traditional debtors who may have struggled to pay in the past. So that's been a positive that because we've had that amount of money, which of course is funded by central government, it means we haven't had to send bills to a lot of businesses. So our collection rate is slightly better, effectively, because we're not having to recover debts from a lot of businesses that haven't got to pay anything this year. I think that's probably the easiest way to probably summarise that one.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. There was a lot of focus on there was a significant amount of former tenant rent arrears which were written off, and I think this report points to the process that has been followed, and effectively over time value is eroded, so therefore it isn't economical to recover that. You obviously pointed to collection rates at this moment in time are up there where we would expect them to be. Are you confident then that in the future we won't be seeing these high level of former rent arrears coming through?
I think the actual level of former tenant arrears is quite low. I think Claire could confirm the exact amount. I think it's around 400,000 now that's actually outstanding, which of course is less than the amount that was written off last year. So we certainly won't be seeing the levels of write-off. I think there was a bit of a clearing out. We had some very old debts going back to the 1990s, which, to be honest, should have been written off a number of years ago. To all credit to the staff, they are like a dog with a bone sometimes, in that they will do everything they can to recover a debt, but sometimes you have to intervene and say, look, we've got other debts which need your attention as well, and you have to make that decision at some point that you've done everything you can and you need to let it go. But yeah, we've I don't know if you want to come in, Claire, and maybe give a bit more information on that.
Yeah, the level is around the 400,000 mark at the moment, and obviously, as Anthony said, that is less than what we wrote off, but that was from a substantial clear out, as Anthony said, of debts where we've held on, we've hoped that somebody would come back to us and things like that. So we took the opportunity to let's focus on the debts that we think that we can actually recover, rather than holding on to those for years and years and things. So. The current arrears at the moment, as Anthony said, we're holding our own. We're doing better than nationally, really, with the levels of debt. So that our residents in Darlington are doing very well to pay. We've offered a lot of support and guidance, and we are receiving quite a lot of money directly from the DWP, sometimes from ourselves requesting that, but other times it's actually from the resident themselves saying, look, I don't know if I can manage this, I'd like you to get the money directly. So we've just moved on to daily processing from that. So we're receiving somewhere around £40,000 a week from the DWP at the moment. And that's directly from people's universal credit. A lot of these people are people who haven't claimed universal credit before, but we've offered them help and support on that.
Okay, thank you. And just one final thing, just obviously an observation, and you were talking about the team, Anthony. The recovery levels at this moment in time are up where historically they've always been, and it's really, really positive. Could you just maybe explain the additional work during COVID that your team has had to carry out? Obviously, funding coming in from grants, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been able to take the normal recovery actions. So during the first lockdown, we didn't send out any kind of statutory reminders until about June time. And there was a lot of sort of personal contact with people where possible. Enforcement agents weren't taking any action. They suspended their recovery action until the end of August, I think. We did manage to go to court in September and get some liability orders for this year's debts, but it's unlikely we'll see another court date before the end of March. But again, all credit to the staff. To be honest, the collection rates are holding up very well, and I guess it's also been useful to review what we've done this year, because there's been less court action. And in terms of Claire's debts, we haven't been able to take anyone to court or evict anyone because of rent arrears yet. Rent arrears are going down, so it does make you stop and think as to whether formal action is actually that effective, given the difficulties people are in, that they have actually paid their rent and paid their council tax and continue to make payments. So it's been an interesting time, but I think at the start we thought it was going to be a disaster. It hasn't actually. It's been okay, but challenging nevertheless.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt it. And just going back to what I was talking about, is that I believe your team has also been processing all of the various, as you said there, business rate support, grants, etc. Is that correct?
Yes, so we've got our normal day-to-day work, and we've seen a big increase in people applying for council tax support. I think we had an extra 1,000 people who applied during the first lockdown. We obviously processed all of the grants back in again March, April, May time. Around about £24 million of grants was paid out to businesses. We've got the current schemes which we're trying to set up, so that's the schemes for the people, for the businesses that are having to close during this lockdown. And we've also got some discretionary grants we're going to need to administer in relation to the businesses that haven't had to close but are nevertheless experiencing financial hardship due to sort of reduced footfall in the town, etc. So we're going to be continuing to be busy throughout the winter, no doubt. But again, all credit to my staff who have kept things ticking over and kept the money coming in during these other challenges we've had to face.
Totally agree, Anthony. It is a credit, and thank you as well. Really appreciate you coming along today, taking your time out. As you know, as you said, it's a really busy time. Thank you. Okay, so apologies, I've just moved some papers. So we can move on to agenda item number 7, which is the project position statement and capital programme and monitoring Q2 report. And is this Dave and Brian who are going to be presenting this report?
Yeah, it's myself, Councillor.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. This report follows the standard format that members have been presented to previously, and it covers both financial aspects of the programme and project management matters up to the end of Q2. The report provides a summary of the latest capital resource and commitment position. This is to inform the monitoring of the affordability and funding of the Council's capital programme. It also provides an update on the status of all the significant construction projects currently being undertaken by the Council, and seeks approval for a further number of changes to the programme. Some of the key points to the report are that there are currently 39 live projects, and there's an expected outturn of 126 million, and those are all within the financial tolerances set in the report. Only one project is beyond tolerances, and that's Ingenium Park. This was also reported to this committee and Cabinet last quarter. It's associated with a delay associated with a timing issue, and having to undertake drainage works during a certain period of the year to suit ecological requirements. So in general, the programme is on target, other than that one project. As mentioned at the sort of previous meeting where this report was presented, the project position statement Appendix 2 is generated from an Excel spreadsheet, which is being superseded by a new system, and that new system is now in delivery phase, and the testing and implementation plans are being developed. Therefore, we're not investing in the current spreadsheet that I know members have had issues with it in the past, and over time that spreadsheet will be phased out and the new reporting put in place. The movements and adjustments in the capital programme since approval of the MTFP for 2022-1 are shown in paragraph 21 and 22. And the recommendations being made to Cabinet that they note the attached status position on the construction projects. They note the projected capital expenditure and resources, and that they approve adjustments to resources as detailed in paragraph 22. Thank you, Chair. And if there's any detailed questions on the appendices of the report, I'm happy to take them along with Elizabeth and Brian, who support the production of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And as you just mentioned there, committee members have had comments to make on the Excel spreadsheet, and it's really positive that project and the box is moving forward. Right. Okay. If I could just open it up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions on the report? I've got Councillor Harker. Would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask some questions on three of the projects that are listed in Appendix 1. Do you want me to do them one by one, or as a batch, Chair? They're relatively straightforward questions in terms of...
If you want to do them one by one, and if I can answer
them,
if I bring Brian, and I will, or Elizabeth.
Sure, yeah, that's no problem. So the first one is project reference 25, which is West Cemetery Development. And in the commentary, you've indicated that there's been a delay. Just trying to read the small print. Clearly a delay means there's going to be a delay. Is there a cost implication with that? And secondly, given some of the works was being done around what we need to do for the crematorium, is there an implication in terms of that, or is it just other things that have been impacted?
That's probably one Brian could answer better than myself, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harkin, and thank you, Chair. There was some delay, obviously, with the COVID impact and decisions as to when we would actually sort of push the button on this development. So there has been some slippage on that, but we made the commitment to go forward with the chapel redevelopment and also with the refurbishment of the crematorium. There's a lot of specialist work involved with the refurbishment of the crematorium. The cremators need to be renewed, and that was a large cost against the refurbishment. But the supplier has agreed to do that at no additional cost, so that'll be done next year. We're managing the process of procurement now in terms of the new chapel and getting that on site in the new year.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, the second question relates to two projects, but they're the Rice Car and Red Hall Send projects, which is 174 and 175. Again, because of COVID, it's reporting that there's delays because of the need for social distancing. Is there an impact other than just a delay in time? Is there a cost implication that we're having to pick up as well?
We did factor in a COVID-related amount of money for that, Councillor Harker, so that's in the budget. And we're working with suppliers as best we can to deliver the scheme. But obviously, there may be supplier issues with COVID as well, so we're just keeping an eye on that. But we're hopefully working towards those times and budgets that suit in there.
And finally, if I may, Chair, more broadly, are we finding that the impact in COVID, is it just about the timing of the projects, or is it having a wider financial implication in terms of the cost?
Well, during the first lockdown, as it was, there was an industry-wide shortage on very simple and basic building materials, including plaster, plasterboard and bricks. So we're seeing that industry-wide, and it's not only to do with materials, it's to do with manpower as well. Obviously, you could lose somebody who works on the site, but also if somebody who works on the site has a member in their household who gets COVID, that has to self-isolate as well as that. So there is an impact across the board, really.
Just to add to that, though, in general, the council's projects are moving forward okay, and we put COVID-safe systems in place to make sure they operate.
Yeah, I mean, the largest scheme we had on the ground, Feetham's House, that was able to continue because the contractor came up with safe means of working during COVID, which allowed for the 2 metre working on site. So that was well managed.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. If I just bring in Elizabeth Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment. It doesn't cover all of the cost, but in the early days, we were able to furlough some of the staff our own staff who were working in some of those areas. So we have received some money back for that. But again, that's only a small proportion, just to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I think my overall question was, I think Councillor Harker has asked it in the comments that have come back. It's obviously focused on resources. Of our contractors, are they commenting on any sort of bund fight between themselves in terms of trying to get manpower on site?
Well, I just asked Wilmot Dixon recently, who are sort of our largest contractor supplier, and they're pretty confident, hopefully with this only being a month-long new lockdown, that they can manage the process basically. And their supply chain, they've got a good level of supply chain, and also they can reach out to other suppliers in the industry. So they're a little bit more positive than they were the last time, but it's probably only on the basis that they think it's only going to be a month affected.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Any other members have any questions? Okay, don't see anybody. Okay, well, I can see here that it's not asking us to actually make any an agreement to the approval of adjustments in paragraph 22. So, are members happy to note the report? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. If we move on to agenda item number 8, which is revenue budget monitoring for Q2, and I'd like to bring in Elizabeth Davison.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is the report that's going to Cabinet next week, and it just summarises the position up to Q2. Overall, it's really good news. We've got an improvement in balances, about £1.1 million. This report does include, well, the biggest significant change, obviously, for this year for us has been the COVID impact on our finances. And Appendix 4 summarises the impacts across each area on that. Some key figures here. We are anticipating to year end that the COVID will cost us £13.7 million. But we have received to date £8.7 million of government grant, and we're also anticipating about £4 million in the sales fees and charges income recompense scheme as well, which would actually just leave a COVID gap of £875,000. This is obviously significantly lower than the last report that came back in Q1, and that's purely because of all of the extra government funding that has been received since that point in time. There is, of course, still a gap of 875, and we continue to lobby government on that, and we fill in monthly returns to MHCLG, which shows what that expenditure is, and we know they are listening to us, so we'll wait and see what happens with that. However, I mean, the overall picture is that we have got a positive balance against original MTFP, notwithstanding the 875, because we've had savings in other areas. The report that we brought to you in Q1 talked about our clawback that we do on an annual basis, which is really a budget rebasing exercise. So we look at year end and we look at the budget figures that we have at that point in time. And you'll recall we clawed back money in a couple of areas. One of them, I mean, Dave's still on the call, one was concessionary fares, which wasn't as high as we anticipated. So that money's been put back into the central pot. So overall, it's a good news position. However, being an accountant, as you can imagine, I always like to be prudent and say it's a good news position for this year, but we do obviously have concerns about the future and next year and ongoing, dependent on what happens with COVID and future impacts, because at this moment in time, we don't know if there'll be any government funding for next year. But really for this year, it's a good news position, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'll open the floor to questions. Does anybody have any questions on the report? I've got Councillor Harker. Would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this report, presumably was written long before the announcement of the current lockdown. The first question is, has government said anything yet about whether they'll be providing support during this period of lockdown as they did earlier in the year?
If you're talking about support to us as a local authority, yes. No, we haven't heard of any more support, but I don't anticipate any extra costs to what I'm already anticipating for this close down period, because we were always anticipating that places like the Dolphin Centre would have low patronage anyway. And I'm sure all members will be aware of the really good news on Arts Council England, where we've received £1 million to keep the Hippodrome running and the staff paid, so we'd already taken that into account. I don't know if you need me to expand on that, Councillor Harker.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thanks.
Chair, I do have a couple of questions on, detailed questions on certain paragraphs. I'm happy to wait if there's other people wanting to come in there.
At this moment, Councillor Harker, there isn't, so I'm happy for you to ask those.
Thank you. One is on page 57 of the report, which comes under Department of Resources Education, little paragraph E, and it refers to the support that we're having to provide for the laptops that were sourced from government. Do you know how many laptops we did in the end get and distribute to children? And do we yet have any expectation what the lifetime is of that? Not specifically necessarily the individual laptops, but, you know, is it for the duration of the lifetime of a laptop, or is it expected that scheme will continue onwards, and hence the support contract that we're having to put into place? Do we have any idea yet as to whether it's time limited?
Apologies, Councillor Harker, I don't have that information, but I can find out for you and let you know.
Thank you. And the second question I had was refers to in paragraph 14.
Councillor Harker, I think you've gone on mute, sorry.
Apologies, yes. Thank you for the first answer. The second question relates to paragraph 14. There's a reference to a grant that we got from government that wasn't anticipated for Troubled Families grant, and it's saying that the money that we received will go into reserves. It sort of implies that the money's then not being spent on whatever it was intended for, which I'm sure is not the case. But can you explain a bit more about what that grant was for? Because in a sense, what I'm puzzled about is if we didn't know the grant was coming, have we second guessed when we spent money on something that government happens to have given us money for? Or, yeah, it's that I'm sort of struggling to understand.
Yes, we didn't think we were going to get the grant, so it was built in as a budget pressure last year because we knew we still needed to continue on. So it was actually built into the budget, and it's been, so yes, the money was built in as a pressure, and now we've been, so that's why we can just take it back into reserves.
Right, I understand. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Just linking into obviously this lockdown, and you mentioned there, Elizabeth, there aren't any expectant costs to come through. I'm assuming we will see some reductions in revenue, which we would hope that government would be covering.
Yes, definitely. But the only main reduction in revenue in this lockdown period, because all council services pretty much are up and running with the exception of the Dolphin Centre, but we'd already been taking a very prudent view on how much income was going to come in, and then of course we're recompensed via the sales fees and charges, so 75% of the money that we don't get, we will get recompensed for anyway, but we'd already been anticipating quite a low base on that because we'd only been taking about 20%, I think it was either between 10 to 20% of income anyway. So there might be a small impact, but I think we're covered with what our projections have been to the year end. Okay,
thank you. And so just what you were talking about earlier, there was obviously, it's in the local press, etc., and there was this £8 million shortfall that we were having to cover. I think you've just basically confirmed that that's down to around about £500,000. Is it following government funding?
875,000, yes.
Sorry, 875. Sorry. Okay. If I could just ask a question on paragraph 2023. It talks about, obviously, there was an improvement in parking income.
Yeah.
And that's taking into account, obviously, the measures that have been put in place to increase the usage over the Christmas period. Is that correct? That's what I'm reading.
This was really just because in Q1 we assumed we weren't going to get any car parking income at all for the whole year. Mm-hmm. But obviously, as time has progressed, we realised, and now the charges have gone back in, notwithstanding there is a 2 hours free, that there is some income coming into the accounts. But at Q1, we'd have thought we were going to get nothing at all.
Okay, and that improvement takes into account this 2 hours free.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And sorry, Councillor Durham, and also that we were getting some money back from the sales fees and charges from the government, which we didn't know at Q1.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Do any other members want to ask any questions? Okay. Sorry, I just need to scroll down the list here. There isn't anybody at this moment in time. Just obviously, we are very, very close to a time when we'll be starting to review the budget. With the uncertainty at this moment in terms of funding, will there be the usual process of a budget and then obviously the MTFP, or is the focus going to be on a one-year budget this time, Elizabeth?
No, I think Cabinet are still minded to look for a 4-year MTFP as good financial management looking forward, and certainly take the point that we are in very fluid times. But yes, we're still looking to have a 4-year MTFP. Obviously, the first year will be more, the estimates will be better for the first year than the fourth, but we are still looking for a long-term programme just as part of good financial management.
Thank you. Just going back to members, does any other members want any questions before we close this item? Okay, no, there aren't any. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for everything you and your team are doing at the moment. I appreciate these are, as you said, fluid, and as such, really difficult times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 9, which is the work programme, and I would just like to bring Shirley in on this, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's just your usual work programme report that members are asked to consider. Appendix 1 just sets out in draft items that have been considered already and that are coming forward over the next 6 months. Appendix 2 gives you the Cabinet's forward plan, index of Cabinet's forwards plan, if there's anything on there that members want to consider bringing through to scrutiny before Cabinet. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Shirley. Do any members want to make any comments? Okay, I've got Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware, and I don't know the full details of it, that on the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee, they have a report looking at the impacts of COVID. And I'm wondering, given the fact that the situation we're in potentially is going to last for many, many months into the future, whether we need to do some work in terms of looking at the impact on our staff. And I'm thinking 2 strands. One is the well-being of our staff, because clearly we have many staff still working from home, staff working in offices, staff working in very strange circumstances, and I'm sure that has the potential for an impact on their well-being. And a second strand is arising from that is potentially looking at what the impact is in terms of the collective productivity of staff within the local authority, because clearly if staff are struggling, even if their mental well-being is fine, it is possible that what we're managing to do as a local authority is diminished because of the circumstances that we're working in. And hence I was wondering whether this committee should do some work on looking at what that impact is.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harker. I think obviously we both sat in on the JCC Scrutiny Committee, where it was talked about at length in terms of the staff's well-being, physical and mental. Obviously, physical because of staff aren't sat behind their office. They're maybe having to sit at a dining table, that sort of thing, and obviously the mental aspect because of we've all been there in terms of having to work from home. Not that there isn't that interaction. There aren't those coffee machine chats, etc. And I think, if I remember rightly, at the JCC, and this was anecdotally, they didn't feel as though there had been an impact on productivity. But I do take into account your comments. If you were able to leave that with me, because I'd like to speak to the Health and Housing Scrutiny Committee, and it's whether or not they're looking at that as part of a wider reaching piece of work. You okay for me to do that, Councillor Harker?
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's difficult to know which committee to send it to, but I guess in part, if it's about staff well-being, it is probably the Scrutiny Committee that would need to pick up that work. But I fully accept the second stand I had about productivity may sit better with the individual scrutiny committees in terms of the work that staff are supposed to be doing. So yeah, it may need to be a joint piece of work across a number of scrutiny committees, but yes, I'm happy for that. And I said I raised it because I think even when that JCC report was written, what was possibly in people's minds is that the strange situation we're in was possibly beginning to tail off. But that's probably an optimistic view of where we are, and I suspect most of the UK is going to be in this situation for many months into next year, and it's that long toll that it may have on staff that made me think we should perhaps have sight of what the ongoing impact is.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No. Yeah. I'll speak to the chairs of the scrutiny committee, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Harker.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cruddas?
Yeah, I share Councillor Harker's concerns about the well-being of our staff, but while he was speaking, I was wondering who would write down the work programme aims. It's a difficult one to set down, isn't it, really? I mean, is someone going to write something for the work programme? Yeah,
that's what I totally appreciate, and that's what I was going to speak to chairs. If I could just bring in Elizabeth Davison, I don't know, in terms of is it overall HR, is there a piece of work that officers are looking at the moment?
Certainly with regard to the wellbeing point of view, I know that the HR team are obviously collecting all the data and they're doing as much as they possibly can on wellbeing. So there's a vast amount of help actually going out there for our staff at the moment. With regard to impact on productivity, we're not doing anything on that at the moment. Anecdotally, what we've seen is managers are not reporting that there has been an impact on productivity at all. Obviously, in the areas which are open, the only impacts are where we've had places closed. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how we would measure that, to be honest, without just asking managers for opinion. But certainly on the wellbeing, there's a lot of work going on to help our staff. I think there was a coffee morning this morning, for example. But we could certainly document everything we've done to date. Maybe once you've had conversations with the other chairs, Councillor Durham, we could get together and see what we could pull together.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Curtis, you still got your hand up, and Councillor Harker, do you want to come back in? Councillor Harker first.
Thank you. It was just to reflect on what Elizabeth had just said. I'm not suggesting necessarily a huge amount of work. If managers generally are saying that, in their view, productivity is not being impacted, then the piece of work may be no more than that. But if they begin to say, actually, they're beginning to see signs of there is an impact, possibly more work does need to be done. So I'm happy to take advice from officers about where we are on that. And if you feel it's necessarily only a light touch at the moment because no one manages reporting anything, then absolutely fine. But if it's more than that, then perhaps we would need to consider it further, and that may be something much further down the line. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with that, Councillor Harker. Councillor Cruddas, you put your hand back down. Okay. Okay, so with regards to the report, does anybody want to make any further comments on the report? Okay. Now I do know that Councillor McEwen spoke to him last night, because I know he has been working on or formulating his plans on a potential piece of work about youth unemployment. So as and when he's crystallises those, we'll be probably looking at a quad of aims. And also, I've had briefings on empty homes and how that impacts not only on the community but obviously on council tax collection, etc. And I'll be liaising with Councillor Dulston, who has obviously been working on a piece of work in the Northgate, and it's how we potentially form a quad of aims for how that could be expanded across the town. Okay. Okay, has anybody got any further comments? Okay, so we can move on to the last item of the agenda, which is number 10, which is supplementary items. Has anybody got any comments, anything that they would like to raise? Okay, Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for Elizabeth, I suspect. We may not know the details yet. We're just going into another period of lockdown. What's the situation in terms of our staff and any furlough schemes? Is the government offering that again? Have we taken up the opportunity? Are we thinking about doing it?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, they are. So for November, they are offering the 80% scheme again, and yes, we'll be utilising that. It will be a lot lower because, of course, we won't be furloughing any of the staff from the Hippodrome because of the funding that we've received from Arts Council England. So it will be significantly lower. But yes, with regard to the staff for the Dolphin Centre, the museum, and I think there's a couple of staff in Eastbourne as well, we will be still utilising that scheme.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Harker.
Sorry, I should have asked in the first question. Will we be topping up the salary for the balance of the 20% for those staff as we did before previously?
Yes, yes, that's the intention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Thank you, Elizabeth. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay, and I would say that concludes this meeting of the Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of November. Just like to say thank you very much for everybody attending, and thank you very much for the officers for taking the time out from their no doubtedly very, very busy day jobs at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you.